natural disaster possibilities. But at the same time, basing ourselves on tremendous resilience of Japanese society, as well as the vibrant cities you can see in Japan. And so we basically started the afternoon with Professor Masuda, and Professor Masuda used really a lot of numbers, and numbers usually don't lie. And when you listen to his numbers, they can be a bit frightening when it comes to demographics. 900 cities in Japan, of which more than 50% will see a decline in population. 500 cities which have 10,000 people or less, many of which will disappear. A population of 50 million by 2100. The good thing about demographic, we learned it from France, is the worst is not always certain, believe me. And I think he came up with a good plan. What I sort of learned from this is, for us here in real estate, we always knew that people move away from the region into the big city and into Tokyo, and that's good news. That's what I thought. The good news of urbanization. But I think what Professor Masuda mentioned to us as well is there is a side effect of urbanization, is when people come into a big city, like Tokyo, like the 100,000 young people who come every year, it's difficult to basically start a family in big cities. It's expensive. And he gave, interesting numbers about, the fertility rate of 1.13 for Tokyo versus the average of 1.43. So I thought that from a real estate perspective, we have to make it easy for young people to have children in Tokyo. What can we do in our industry to facilitate that? And I think the other interesting point he made is that the government is very keen to develop a network of compact cities. So maybe we should not write off regional cities so quickly, especially if the government has a plan to make them more vibrant and more compact. The panel with Jasper Cole and his panelists was really interesting. I have to say it started off a little bit too seriously for me, on return on equity, whether it should be single digit or double digit, and how to move from low risk to low return, to high risk and higher return, the problematic of lack of labor and increasing cost. Some interesting takeaways. One is the areas we should focus on, the opportunities from declining population is around maybe focusing on empty houses, or the topic of renovation, the topic of specialty retail for the asset class. I think some interesting facts about immigration, which moved without anybody really advertising, going from 3% to 5%. But I think the most interesting statistic from the panel was basically the 400,000 people of, I think, 50 or 60, actually 60 years and older coming to the market and have three characteristics. They are unbelievably rich, they have lots of time, and they know how to have fun. So Japan seems to be one of the few countries where older people are younger than the younger people. That's what I stood out from this conversation. And whether, if this age group has more sex, as he suggested, unfortunately it will not add much to the population growth. Okay. The second panel, so that was it on this, on the panel of population decline or growth. The second panel was more classic for us from the real estate industry. I think we are very fortunate to have, capital from China, Middle East, Singapore and Germany. When you think about it, these 5 countries or regions are really the ones which had net export of capital to invest in real estate, and it was really interesting to have that point of view. I noted 5 from the presentation. One, don't compete with domestic capital, but partner with it. That was the point Barry made. 2, let's not forget foreign exchange. I think it's quite attractive to invest in Japan for the time being if you come from overseas. 3, try to predict the cycles. I have to say, for all the money we invest in research, if it all comes to baseball and the clock or camera race, maybe we don't need all the research to predict the markets. So it's basically 9 p.m. In Tokyo. With quality comes growth. I think that's important in Japan. And then finally, I think the location, of all cities we should know, and I think that's a point Ken Chang made very well. And then I think one other point, which was also raised is that wealth is growing in Asia. And we tend to forget that Japan is a very wealthy country with a very wealthy part of the population, and that part of the market we haven't really tapped yet, and we should maybe focus on that. Finally, I will conclude with the final keynote of Andrew O'Reilly. Of course, tourism is a different industry than real estate, but what I learned from his presentation is that how important it is to use data. You know, he showed really good data on the Japanese segmentation. You know, we don't use data enough in real estate. We are maybe a little bit too lazy sometimes. In tourism, you cannot be lazy. It's a competitive industry, and I think the way he thought about it, using data, using very precise marketing, is maybe a lesson we could apply to our own industry. And of course, you know, from his speech, we took that the enormous opportunity tourism will represent in Japan. When you say Japan is 39th in the list, and France is number 1. I know those countries, you know, they should be very close to in terms of attractiveness. And I think it's going to be, for, as Ken Chang mentioned in his panel discussion, you know, hospitality should be a very big sector on which, you know, we should be focusing more. So that's in short, in a few minutes, my summary from this afternoon. I would like to thank the presenters and panelists, as well as the program committee headed by Tomikawa-san for today's session. And as John Fitzgerald said in his opening remark, we really welcome you at the June 2 to 4 Asia Pacific Conference, which will gather many people from Asia here in Tokyo. Thanks very much for this afternoon, and let's have some drinks together. Thank you.
As Francois said,